What?
Yeah. Well, okay. I think we may have an alt section in the back over there with Graciela. Yeah. Yeah. Who are available in case of
Maybe,
emergency.
maybe
Yeah.
turn down your draw distance or any other settings that.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I haven't done that.
Yeah.
But I shall do that because I don't need it at all right now.
Yeah. Not. Yeah. I mean, at least for just seeing us or in your slides.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have 1 minute after the hour on my official atomic clock connected watch. And so we'll wait till 2 after the hour, and then we will begin.
Okay.
And Fran, I'm trusting that all is well in terms of your technology needs, voice checks, so forth. Okay, very good.
Oh, good.
Okay, it's officially 2 minutes after the hour, so I'm going to begin. My part's not the important part, so we can now give some extra time for other people to join us. But hello, everybody. Happy July and happy heat wave and whatever else for those of you here from the United States. My name is Merrill McBride. Most of you know me already. And I have the pleasure of serving as your host today. I want to welcome you to this edition of VWEC Expert Series, in which we ask educational professionals to share their experiences and their insights into ways in which virtual worlds can be used to engage students. I'm pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Delia Lake, or Linda Morris Kelly in RL, who is a principal and enterprise ecologist with Transitioning to Green LLC. She works at the nexus in which big picture vision meets practical implementation to produce thriving, sustainable enterprise, which is another way of saying what she does is important. Delia is a co-author of the Sustainable Enterprise Field Book, Building New Bridges, which is in its second edition from Routledge in 2019. Today, Delia is going to talk about immersion, a special gift offered by virtual worlds to educators in search of new ways to invigorate and to add value to the learning experience. She will share several experiences from her past, but will focus on the situation in Darfur in talking about immersion. Please be advised that this presentation will be recorded and streamed on YouTube and will be fully captioned. Please see the instructions on the sign to my lower right that includes the URL. All right. This is a somewhat different presentation in that about now I would stop speaking, but I'm not going to. So get over it. Yeah. But before we get to Delia's presentation, I was asked to set the stage, so to speak, about where Sudan and Darfur are located. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a professor of geography, recently retired at Colorado State University, Fort Collins. I have taught political geography courses to college juniors, seniors, and graduate students since 1981, in which African topics have been covered. Although I'm far from being an authority on Africa, trust me. I used to teach a basic world regional geography class that included Africa as one of the units, which I thought was interesting and fun, but my students still hate me. Yes, Africa was, and still is, a dark continent in the geographical understanding of many people. And maybe even today, Africa deserves to be an inscrutable geographical project, given the numerous name and other changes made during decolonization, and then the later changes to the changes. For example, is it Congo, or is it Zaire, Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, whatever? Followed by a giant who cares for many people. And we are not done with those sorts of changes as we try to understand contemporary Sudan. First, the old Sudan, which was before what we see now, the old Sudan included the territory that you see on the map with the red names, Sudan and South Sudan. What we now call Sudan was one of the historically significant territories that occupied the Nile River corridor with its ancient civilizations. We can think Kush and Nubians here, rivaling and sometimes actually overtaking their Egyptian kin downriver. Over time, Sudan was settled by Arab nomads, among other groups, and eventually fell under the sway of British imperialists from the north. Culturally, Muslims came to dominate the north of Sudan and Christians the south. Arabic, however, was an official language. Sudan became an independent state in 1956, but hardly a state free of strife. A first civil war erupted in 1995 and lasted until 1972 between Christians and Muslims, with Sharia-based Islamic law ultimately introduced. A second civil war broke out shortly thereafter, responding to the same religious tensions. A new state of South Sudan appeared as a result in 2011. Not that the breakup of Sudan led to peace, however. In 2023, a third civil war embroiled Sudan as the Sudanese armed forces and a paramilitary group called the Rapid Support Forces began fighting in a war that is ongoing today. But our interest today is in Darfur, a culturally diverse territory with, for example, roughly 16 languages in use, a territory racked by often violent attempts of various groups to gain tribal advantages. Darfur was nominally independent before succumbing to the power of a neighboring Sudanese warlord in 1874. The British came to think of Darfur as a strategic threat, especially when they were battling the Ottomans in World War I and forced Darfur into the Anglo-Egyptian condominium in 1916 during World War I. Darfur became part of an independent Sudan in 1956, but persistent drought and growing famine in the 1980s caused the simmering antagonisms in Darfur to erupt into a low-grade series of internecine conflicts. By 2003, however, hostilities became open, brutal, and widespread. The Sudanese government picked sides, supporting the infamous Janjaweed in particular, and was complicit in the growing number of humanitarian disasters that, by 2010, had claimed perhaps 480,000 lives and forced about 3 million people into refugee camps. Nobody is sure of the exact numbers. The UN assembled one of the largest peacekeeping initiatives in history but could not put out the fire. Neither could the African Union and its troops. Numerous peace plans were proposed and scuttled until in 2020, when something resembling a truce took effect, but unfortunately not for long. Conflict resumed with the outbreak of the 2023 Sudanese Civil War, and new massacres resulted. All right, Delia.
Okay.
This is the setting in which Delia wants to immerse us. I now turn the presentation over to Delia. Good luck.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. Before I start on anything else, I want to know how many people here, before listening to Meryl, knew where Darfur was. Please put in chat. I was looking to see how many people knew where Darfur was. And I'm asking, and it's mixed here. And I'm asking because in the United States particularly, and to a degree in Western Europe, we do not get a lot of information, news, anything about most places in Africa. It's almost as though it's something to the south that barely exists. And I'm not sure that my system is stable, so I'm not sure I can change the slide. So, Meryl, maybe you would do that for me, or Ellie, or somebody.
I'd be happy to do that.
The crash
Yeah.
out. I don't have to. Yeah.
So you just say change slides or something.
Marley, save that question. We'll see if we have time to talk about that later. Yes. Yeah. If you can change the. Okay. So this is about education and immersion. And some of you have seen some of these slides before, but we're going to go into it in a different way and a bit deeper here. As I'm sure you all know, education in Second Life has so much richness to offer, and it's well beyond merely recreating the teaching practices that we have used traditionally in that solid world that we inhabit as well. Here in Second Life, we have the opportunity to bring information to life, to animate it. And we can do that through immersive experiences. It's one of the most powerful things you can do other than having the same experience in that other solid world. And it's right at our fingertips. So all we have to do is use it. And I hope this will inspire some of you to test it out and to do it with your students. Next slide, please. So when I came to Second Life in 2006, I ended up on Better World Island. It no longer exists, but it was a wonderful place for me. And we had many exhibits here there. I did, not surprisingly, water and undersea, which I've done throughout my time here. But one of the other sidebars here on Better World Island was a place called Camp Darfur. Now, I knew where Darfur was. I knew a little bit about the situation, but I didn't know a whole lot. And when I decided to try some immersion and get a deeper experience, I decided I would go to the place that I knew on Better World. So there were a couple of decision points for me. One was it was close, but the other thing, the life there was totally alien to me. You know, I live in a comfortable United States community in a small but lovely house. I eat regularly. I drive a car. I do all of the things that many of you do, maybe most of you do. But there is nothing similar in one of the refugee camps in Darfur. So it was also motivated by meeting and talking with Pam Omajar. Now, Pierre and Pam were the founders of eBay, and they have been philanthropists throughout their adult life. And the Omajars and the International Rescue Committee were the funders and supporters of Camp Darfur on Better World Island. So when I decided to do this, I was asking myself a bunch of questions. And also, let me add that please make this interactive. Ask questions anytime. This can be a conversation as well as a presentation. But I asked myself, how interested am I in this? And I was very curious. So I was pretty interested. And if you're going to do an immersion, make sure you are interested and that you commit to it. Don't just pop in for a day. Do some research, but think about also what personal rules and constraints you might have, and particularly the degree of simulated realism that you want to use here. So I thought about this in great detail. Did I want to be there as a tourist, or did I want to be there as a resident? And one of the reasons that I thought about this is that for many years I have off and on taught about cultural issues, and particularly when you are culturally not correct so much as sensitive and not offensive. And so if I were going to be a resident, should I be like I am in RL, an older white-skinned person, or would it be okay to have darkened skin? And I ended up deciding on darkened skin because it felt so out of place to be hanging out there in white skin, like I was an observer of somebody else's life and I didn't belong. And that gets in the way of having an immersive experience. I did not change my features, so I did this as an alt, still had blue eyes, and still had the same features that I've had all the time. The other two things here are, if you're going to do this, the commitment is to stick to it. Now, I don't know that in retrospect I would have chosen 6 weeks as my first experience here, but that's what I did. And so once I had chosen 6 weeks, I stuck with that. And every day, every morning, I would log into Second Life and I would be right there in that camp. And I also decided I would only do 6 weeks. And so I needed to know that I was going to have a conclusion, which is radically different than the people who are there. They have no conclusion. And some of them have been there for decades. Next slide, please. So We're going to start here by talking about today, and Meryl did excellent job of setting that up a little bit here. And since, as she said, in 2023, the war has intensified again. And the camps that have already been severely overcrowded, and it's not just camps in Darfur, but the displacement and displaced people are all in the surrounding areas, particularly in Chad, but also in Ethiopia, and even as far as the Congo. So a lot of people have been displaced. As of 6 months ago, it was over 11 million people have been displaced. Now, that's over a 20-year time, but 11 million people is the population of Darfur. So although not everybody was displaced, it gives you a sense of the enormity of this. And the other thing is that hundreds of thousands have been killed. There's no body count. There's not like Rwanda actually was a fairly close body count. So good question and a good segue, Dolly. And so let's go to the next slide. But remember that this is the largest displacement of children in the entire world, and we don't hear about it. So there were, in 2006, 2.5 million people displaced, and already so many people killed. The Janjaweed, as Meryl mentioned, were the local parlance is their devils on horseback. They're terrifying. But one of the things, and one of the reasons I chose this particular picture, and it is from 2006, is that in spite of all of this, this is a picture of a former teacher and current at that time teacher in the camp, a refugee, teaching the children. So no matter what the situation is, human beings have a marvelous, marvelous ability to find hope where there is such desperation. Okay, next slide. So we are going to now look at what this situation was on Better World Island and Camp Darfur, and I will get to those questions. Next slide. So this goes, next slide goes to Dolly's question first, which is that for many years, the region of Darfur was green. It had plenty of water, and it supported farming communities, which were basically Black African tribal communities. And it also, there was enough water and enough vegetation to support the Afro-Arabic pastoralists, the nomadic goat herders. When drought struck in the late 1990s, that changed. There was no longer enough vegetation, and there was no longer enough water to support both of those. Farmers put up fences. The pastoralists could not graze their goats, and people were starving. So that's the setup for here in Darfur, but many of the conflicts and wars around the world start with environmental issues, in this case, severe drought. So, Shiloh, the people in control are, but control isn't even the right word for now. There is a government. It is basically the descendants of the Afro-Arab group that Merrill mentioned had moved in centuries ago. But it is, there are a number of paramilitary groups that terrorize the populations here. So the fear and famine and desperation had people leave their ancestral homelands and move into these makeshift camps because there wasn't enough food or water anywhere. And the UN and many of the other humanitarian agencies did the best they could at providing food and water for these people. And some of them moved into the closer camps and then were taken in by other countries. Almost no people have been repatriated, which is very difficult. Next slide. So this is the setting where I decided to be an immersive resident. And that is my alt in 2007, stepping into a very alien world. Next slide. So any questions as we're going along? Or any other questions I should ask? So just about everybody who's in these camps have lived sufficient lives before the severe drought. The camps are more women and children than men, and that's because men have either been constricted or sold, or killed rather. So the women have, some of them even from professional lives, have formed communities. Yeah, Marley, there are a lot of places in Africa that have situations not as extreme as this, because this is driven by drought as well as anything else. But there are all around the world. I mean, all you have to do is think of say the Uyghurs in China or the Rohingya in Myanmar. We just don't hear it. Yeah, it does include massacres. We just don't hear about it. But think about in the United States, where you have people who are brown-skinned people being rounded up and put in essentially concentration camps. So while this is a primary example, it is by far not the only situation around the world. And that's the other reason I chose to talk about this today, because it doesn't show up in our news. And we could assume that it isn't happening, but it is. Yeah, a lot of people who were part of this, part of building it and part of maintaining it, Shiloh, are no longer in Second Life, and the site is gone. So in keeping with my decision to be an immersed resident here, I not only logged in, but I had to go and get the food and the grain and water and make meals. So I had to spend the time rather than going off and listening to music or seeing an art show or something. I spent the time in Second Life doing the tasks that people there would have to do in order to sustain themselves. Next slide. As I did this day after day after day, I would log in and I would see this woman with her young child on her back. And you know, this funny thing happened was after a few weeks of doing that, I felt that I knew her. But as monotonous as some of these tasks were, and boy, they were, there was also an underlying fear and anxiety. So, next slide, please. And that's where the Janjaweed came in, because the Janjaweed came through and attacked. They burned tents, they burned landscape, they burned food, they raped women and children. And there was no secure place to hide. All of these camps are very insecure and open. And I must say, let me add also that although they started out with tens of thousands, some of them are now, I think one of them is as large as 500,000 people. And that is almost impossible for me to imagine that you have a refugee camp that is the size of a Western city. So that when you are immersed in something like this, the fear becomes palpable. Even though I was never in any danger, viscerally, I could feel it. Next slide. My one solace here was I still had my donkey. And it's funny how even the representation, an inanimate representation of a very animated creature, can bring you comfort. But it was one of the lessons in being immersed in a very, very difficult situation. And so I looked forward every day to seeing this donkey, hearing it neigh, and giving some respite to everything else I was doing. Now, this is making it sound like it was a very unpleasant experience, but I want to tell you it was not. There were a lot of people who came through. There were a few other people who decided to stay here. I had conversations with people as they passed through. One of the conversations that I distinctly remember, though, that surprised me a lot was when two young men, I think they were, so far as I could tell, they were young men of Arab background who actually lived in Khartoum. And they came in and they were yelling at me. And they were yelling at me because they didn't believe that their Sudanese government would participate in something like this and participate in what is essentially a genocide. And so we had a long, multiple hour, very animated conversation about the conditions in Sudan, which is another thing that can happen in Second Life. That if I am walking around the streets in the small city where I live, sorry, this is my dog. He's now telling me that he's back and he had a good time, but he doesn't want the person who had him for the day to leave. So back to, he'll calm down in just a minute. So back to this experience, to have conversations like that you would never, ever have in the real world, the solid world, is quite extraordinary in Second Life, I have found. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide and talk about some of the other things that I learned during this experience. So, what did I notice? First, I couldn't help but be struck by the isolation. Now, that was partly because I was mostly with photographs and not with actual people, but even when I was with actual people, I could feel that, and the grief and the desolation. And I was a little bit surprised that people who lost everything still managed to find a way to have something, that some ownership of something that was theirs was important. But most of all, that in these dire circumstances, people could nurture hope, create conditions where they could build hope for a better life. I was absolutely hit in the face every day by my my privilege as a Western white woman. To the degree I always knew I was privileged in some ways, but not to the degree that I got it when I did this. I did talk about the anxiety and the tedium, but the Janjaweed, although they may have come from the pastoral stock, just became the paramilitary and the marauders. They really weren't any kind of an organized group other than the military, a pseudo-military group, and still are. But there are more groups like that now today in Darfur. And the last thing with the young man I talked to from Khartoum was that the privilege that I felt as a white woman was equaled or maybe exceeded by the privilege that they felt as wealthy Afro-Arab men in a male-dominated society. And that's another, in addition to the massacres and the wars and the that are taking place, little pockets around the world, is that we don't hear or recognize to the degree that I think it is around the sense of privilege that people who have a lot have in any country, in any culture, in any place in the world. So, yeah, yes, lady. And we have plenty of examples here in the United States. There are certainly with the, and in South America, that the um, people of European ancestry came and massacred the indigenous peoples in both places. So I wish this were not true of human beings, but we have a whole lot of examples of this happening. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't know about it and we shouldn't use that awareness to craft the decisions that we make, both nationally and locally, about what we can do. Now, we don't have, none of us here, I think, have the agency to wave a wand and have this disappear. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be aware of and appreciate our privilege and make sure that we are not taking advantage of other people. Um, so, if there are more, yes, Marley, that is, there's a huge difference, in my opinion, between an intellectual understanding and a visceral understanding. And with the immersion, you get a visceral understanding of things that you might read about but don't really know. Um, and this is one of the beauties that we have in Second Life that I really encourage people to take advantage of. And if you want to do that, it doesn't have to be something as hard as the situation in Darfur, but choose something that is alien to you, something that you're interested in, but you don't know. It's radically different than your solid world life. Yeah. Yeah. In the camps, people can educate the girls, and that does happen. Matt, I haven't even thought about that. I suppose I could. I suppose I could. I hadn't even thought about doing that. Um, maybe we should do that, something with not just me, but other people here in VWEC that would be part of a manual for virtual education. That might be a fun project. Yes. So far, I have been talking about this, but talking about an immersion is doesn't do it justice. And as I said to Ellie when I asked her if I could do this, it would be like standing here and talking about a chocolate cake with delicious, sticky, gooey, sweet icing and just describing it to you. So those of you who come here regularly may notice that in front of me, and to my left, there is a hill that wasn't here yesterday. Um, that hill is a roost that hides something, and I'm going to make that hill, which is um, transparent. I think. See, it should. Give me a minute. It will be transparent because you all can walk right through there. And so I encourage people to go through and walk into the desert there. Marley, I did not find teenagers there. I, I wish we could have had teenagers. In 2006, the whole setup of Second Life was different, and they had a teen grid, and so we didn't have them. And I wish they had. I hope I don't crash out. I've been crashing out today. But let's walk on through, and it will be crowded. But please do come with me, and we will go this time as tourists. This is a very small recreation, which is different. I mean, we have better tools and better graphics than we had in 2006 for sure. But I wanted to give you some sense of what it is like to walk into an alien place and to imagine coming back here day after day after day, to having a limited amount of water, even in great heat, a very limited amount of water. So bathing is just about out of the question. Well, it is out of the question. Barely enough water to satisfy your drinking needs for the day. You don't know what grain you're going to get time after time. It may be something that you had never eaten before you came to a camp, but you would get some grain. You know, walk into a tent, lie down. Take a breath and imagine you lived here, not for 6 weeks, but for 6 years. It's barter, Shiloh, because you have people with different skills. Um, and so you have some people who are still proficient at crafts. But there is no outside economy. There can't be. There's no way to get things in and out other than by the, you could try to walk out, but it's um, both the environment and the danger from the paramilitaries is too great. Yeah, yeah, not much better than a prison. Although you can go and make friends, you can walk around within the camp. But people still not only make things from the little bit they have, but they make music, make instruments, sing songs, tell stories. Most of them have not arrived empty-handed, but have some of their possessions. That's why my alt could have a donkey, that she had the donkey already. So they have some things, but are highly reliant on donated things. No, the tents were already there, Max. I did not put up my own tent. It was provided by the UN. Yeah, and as I said, the people who were part of Better World Island at that time, so far as I know, are no longer in Second Life. You know, as an outcropping, outgrowth of this, in I think it was 2007, we also participated in a celebration of the International Criminal Court in Second Life, and so got to reach a whole lot of new audience with some of the stories through that venture. Yeah, Marla, I think that would be really good if we could do that with some of the younger people. Yes. Um, yeah, so yeah, what a surprise that there are feral donkeys. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, we're about
Yeah,
to run out of our time.
definitely.
Uh, let
Use the
me
music to dance.
say
Yeah.
a few final words, then we can turn people loose to ask additional questions, come back and visit this extraordinary display. First, I want to give Delia Hardy thank you for her presentation. Her slides are available on the slides and information wall sort of behind me. It's the presentation under the spotlights. We're trying to get people's attention. We can adjourn to the deck at the back of the venue to address questions, other questions captured in chat that were not addressed, and discuss any other questions and comments that people may have. Before we do that, however, please note that the next installment of the VWEC Expert Series is in August, in mid-August. The date and the content are posted out front. During this time of year, we only have these presentations once a month, and when fall comes, we'll return to the twice a month format. Finally, you can find links to our in-world calendar and related information in the material that I will add to the text in just a moment. And we can be reached through a variety of media. Once again, please see the text in a few minutes as I add everything. Please join me as we adjourn to our social space on the back deck, where you can imbibe in all sorts of alcoholic non-intoxicants and indulge your sweet tooth with calorie and sugar-free treats. Or, in this particular case, you may come back and make friends with the camel and the donkey and experience this highly effective immersion display a little bit longer. So have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you.
Yeah. Marley, the answer to your question there is yes, they absolutely did. And I did meet some people and learn a few songs, which I've mostly forgotten. Yes. Ellie, would it be okay to leave this up for the week so people could come back here if they wanted to? And by next Friday, I would take it away. And you're all welcome. I'm very glad that you all came today. And I hope that you will follow through on some of your own interests and try some immersive experiences.